Ethan Mitchell, a retired postal worker living in a quiet town in Vermont, had always cherished his nightly routine. By 9:30 p.m., he would be tucked under his flannel sheets, a warm cup of chamomile tea on the nightstand, and the soft hum of the wind outside lulling him to sleep. But lately, something strange had been happening. Nearly every night, without fail, Ethan would jolt awake, eyes wide open, at exactly 3 a.m. At first, he thought it was just part of getting older. But as the weeks went by, the wake-ups became more frequent and more frustrating. He'd lie there staring into the darkness, mind racing through memories of his late wife, unpaid bills, and doctor appointments. Why 3 a.m.? He'd whisper to himself. He tried herbal remedies, warm baths, and even adjusting his bedtime, but nothing worked. That haunting hour returned like clockwork. What he didn't realize was that his body, like many seniors, was trying to send him a message about stress, diet, and changes happening deep inside him that he hadn't yet acknowledged. This is Ethan's story, but it might just be your story too. Waking up at 3 a.m., you're not alone, and it could be more serious than you think. Millions of older adults find themselves wide awake in the middle of the night, but doctors say it's not just aging, it's your body trying to tell you something. Press 1 now to discover why waking up at 3 a.m. could signal hidden health issues and what you can do to finally get deep, restorative sleep again. Better sleep means better brain health, stronger immunity, and more energy to enjoy your day. Don't ignore the signs. Press 1 to take control of your nights and your health. One night after yet another 3 a.m. wake-up, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his temples in frustration. He felt exhausted but wired, as if some invisible switch had been flipped inside his brain. This time, instead of reaching for his phone or turning on the TV, he walked quietly to the kitchen and sat by the window, staring into the moonlit backyard. The silence was loud. Something didn't feel right anymore. This wasn't just about sleep. It was something deeper. A sense of imbalance had started to creep into his life. His body was tired, but his mind was constantly alert. He noticed small changes he'd ignored before. His hands sometimes trembled when pouring coffee. His heart raced after eating dinner. And worst of all, he had this nagging sense of unease, like he was forgetting something important. That night, Ethan decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He started writing. In a small leather-bound journal, he scribbled, "Why am I always waking up at 3 a.m.? What's my body trying to tell me?" He spent the next few days reading medical blogs, watching wellness videos, and even calling his old army buddy Caleb, who had recently gone through something similar. Caleb shared how his own 3 a.m. wake-ups were tied to stress, poor sleep habits, and even liver function. "You think you're fine, but your body's waving a red flag, brother," Caleb said. That stuck with Ethan. He dove into researching circadian rhythms, something he'd never heard of before. He discovered that between 2 and 4 a.m., the liver is in overdrive, detoxifying the body. He also learned how cortisol spikes due to hidden stress could trigger wakefulness, especially in aging adults. The deeper he dug, the more sense it all made. Then came the breakthrough. Ethan kept a log of what he ate, how much water he drank, and what time he went to bed. Patterns emerged. On nights he had a late dinner or sipped wine before bed. He always woke up at 3 a.m. When he skipped a walk or sat watching TV all afternoon, the restless nights followed. He wasn't just waking up randomly. His body was trying to have a conversation. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan was listening. One cold December morning, after yet another restless night, Ethan was pouring himself a cup of black coffee when he suddenly dropped the mug. It shattered across the kitchen floor, hot liquid splashing across his slippers. He stood there, stunned, not just by the mess, but by the tremor in his hands. This wasn't clumsiness. It was something else. That was the moment he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. His daughter, Victoria, had been gently urging him to get a checkup for months. That same day, he called her and said, "I think it's time." 2 days later, they sat side by side in Dr. Lawson's office, surrounded by walls lined with diplomas and the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. After a few tests and careful conversation, the doctor leaned forward and said, "Ethan, you're not just dealing with poor sleep. You're dealing with chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, and your blood sugar levels are unstable. Waking up at 3 a.m. is your body's distress signal." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He had always prided himself on being strong, independent, the man who handled things without complaining. But here he was, facing the fact that years of quiet worry, an unbalanced diet, and poor sleep habits had caught up with him. What truly surprised him, though, wasn't the diagnosis. It was how connected everything was. His liver, overworked by late-night snacks and a few too many glasses of wine. His nervous system, stuck in fight-or-flight mode long after the day had ended. His breathing, shallow and tense, as if he were bracing for something without knowing what. It all made sense now. That same week, he joined a local health and wellness class for seniors, where they practiced deep breathing, gentle stretching, and shared stories of sleepless nights and second chances. One woman, Eleanor, spoke about how changing just a few small things, less caffeine, blackout curtains, morning walks, completely transformed her sleep. "You'd be amazed what a little sunlight and deep breath can do," she smiled. Ethan began to see a new path. He wasn't broken, just out of tune, and with the right habits, he could get back in rhythm. He wasn't waking up because something was wrong. He was waking up because his body was begging him to pay attention. A few weeks into his new routine, something shifted in Ethan, not just in his sleep, but in his entire outlook on life. He used to see those 3 a.m. wake-ups as frustrating interruptions, cruel reminders that his body was aging, unraveling. But now he saw them differently. They were signals, clues, messages from within that he had ignored for far too long. Instead of lying in bed filled with worry, Ethan began to use those moments to center himself. If he woke at 3 a.m., he wouldn't panic. He would quietly sit up, take a few deep breaths, and remind himself that his body was simply readjusting. "I'm safe, I'm healing, I'm listening," he'd whisper in the dark. He even began to journal during those early hours, not out of restlessness, but reflection. He wrote about his late wife, about regrets he hadn't voiced, about memories long buried under the noise of daily routine. In those quiet moments, he wasn't just awake, he was aware. The biggest change came when he stopped seeing his health as something to fear and started viewing it as something to nurture. He found peace in small rituals, sipping warm lemon water before bed, doing gentle Tai Chi in the mornings with a group of retirees at the local park, and walking barefoot on the dewy grass to reconnect with the earth beneath him. He began to limit blue light exposure in the evenings, replacing TV time with a calming playlist or a favorite book. He dimmed the lights an hour before bed and made his bedroom a sanctuary, cool, dark, and free of distractions. One night, after weeks of consistency, Ethan woke up at 7:12 a.m., the first time in months that he had slept through the night. He sat up in disbelief, then smiled softly. No racing thoughts, no tight chest, just rest, real rest. What he once saw as a curse had become a blessing, a turning point that reconnected him to his body, his memories, and his purpose. Ethan no longer feared 3 a.m. He respected it because it had forced him to pause, reflect, and take back control of something he thought was lost, his well-being. With his sleep slowly improving and his mind finally at ease, Ethan found himself waking up not just well-rested, but curious. He had more energy, and with that came a desire to do more than simply get through the day. For the first time in years, he wondered, what if this chapter of life wasn't about decline, but discovery? It started with a flyer posted at the community center: mindful living for seniors, gardening, movement, meditation. Normally, Ethan would have passed it without a second glance, but something inside nudged him to take one. That weekend, he showed up early, unsure of what to expect. By the end of the session, he had planted his first herb, basil, and exchanged numbers with a woman named Grace, who laughed at his joke about forgetting to water it. Every morning became something to look forward to. He'd walk to the garden patch behind the center, smell the fresh earth, and breathe in the scent of rosemary and lavender. Gardening gave his hands purpose and his mind peace. It was no longer just about sleep. It was about living with intention. Ethan also found joy in mentoring. A local school had launched a program inviting retired professionals to speak to students about life skills. When asked if he'd talk about his career as a postal worker, he hesitated. "What could they possibly learn from me?" he asked Grace. Her reply stayed with him. "They don't need perfection. They need presence." So he did it. He stood in front of a group of high schoolers, telling stories about delivering letters in Vermont snowstorms, about patience, responsibility, and showing up, even when you don't feel like it. To his surprise, the students listened. They asked questions. They laughed. That night, Ethan didn't wake at 3 a.m. He had found a rhythm, a reason. The wake-ups had led him to something deeper, a second wind, a renewed purpose, a realization that there was still so much life left to live, and that maybe, just maybe, aging wasn't about fading away, but about shifting focus. Ethan's journey into better sleep had become a journey into rediscovering joy. And every morning, as the sun rose behind the Vermont hills, Ethan would sit with his tea, watching the light touch the trees, grateful for the chance to begin again. As the seasons shifted from winter to spring, Ethan's transformation became undeniable, not just to himself, but to everyone around him. His posture was straighter, his laugh came easier, and perhaps most remarkably, his eyes, once tired and clouded with worry, now held a quiet, enduring light. What had changed? Everything and nothing. He was still Ethan, still the same man who loved routine, crossword puzzles, and jazz records on Sunday mornings. But now there was depth behind the simplicity. He didn't just go through the motions, he chose them. Every morning walk was a conscious act of gratitude. Every herbal tea, a reminder to nourish his body. Every deep breath, a symbol of peace he had once believed was beyond his reach. But growth didn't mean perfection. There were still days when he woke up before dawn, still nights when memories surfaced and tears rolled silently down his cheeks. But instead of resisting, Ethan welcomed those moments. They no longer signified weakness. They signified healing. He learned to speak kindly to himself, to rest without guilt, to accept that aging was not a descent, but a deepening, a time to grow inward and become more whole. Ethan began to teach others what he had learned, not from a place of superiority, but from compassion. He shared his breathing techniques with other seniors at the community center. He taught Grace how to make lemon balm tea to soothe her nerves. He even helped a neighbor's grandson manage anxiety through a simple bedtime routine. Word got around. People started calling him the Calm One, a nickname he found oddly fitting. His daughter Victoria noticed the difference too. During one visit, as they sat on the porch watching the cardinals dart through the trees, she said, "Dad, you seem lighter." Ethan chuckled softly. "I guess I finally learned how to rest, sweetheart." That night, he reflected on how far he'd come, from restless nights and a cluttered mind to peaceful mornings and meaningful purpose, from resisting change to embracing it. He wasn't chasing the man he used to be. He was becoming the man he was always meant to become. In growing older, Ethan hadn't lost himself. He had, in fact, come home to himself. One quiet Sunday morning, as sunlight filtered through the lace curtains and the scent of blooming lilacs drifted through the open window, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He wasn't journaling about sleepless nights anymore. He was writing a letter to his younger self. "You spent so many years trying to fix things by pushing harder, staying busy, pretending nothing was wrong," he wrote. "But rest isn't laziness. Stillness isn't weakness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply listen to your body, your breath, your heart." As he wrote, Ethan realized something profound. His journey wasn't just about sleep. It was about learning to live awake. For decades, he'd focused on doing, solving, providing. He'd worn strength like armor. But in these quieter years, he had discovered that vulnerability was its own kind of strength. That presence was more powerful than productivity. And that healing wasn't something you chase, it's something you allow. He had stopped trying to conquer time and had instead chosen to befriend it. He no longer feared the clock striking 3 a.m. In fact, on the rare occasions it still happened, he welcomed it as a familiar visitor, a reminder of how far he had come. He would breathe deeply, smile gently, and drift back into sleep without resistance, knowing that his body was no longer sounding the alarm, but simply resting between chapters. When neighbors asked how he seemed so at peace, Ethan would say, "It started with waking up at 3 a.m. I thought it was a curse, but it turned out to be the greatest invitation of my life. An invitation to slow down, to reflect, to reconnect." And that's the beauty of it. Sometimes the interruptions, the discomforts, the wake-up calls are exactly what we need to find our way back to ourselves. Ethan's story is not unique, but it is a reminder that no matter your age, your past, or how many restless nights you've endured, it's never too late to change your story, to rewrite your rhythms, to reclaim your peace. Because the truth is, healing doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it begins at 3 a.m. Sometimes life speaks to us in whispers, in the form of a sleepless night, a restless thought, or a body that simply won't cooperate the way it used to. But what if those disruptions weren't problems to fix, but invitations to listen? Ethan's journey began with frustration and confusion, but over time he discovered that his body was not betraying him. It was trying to communicate. The 3 a.m. wake-ups were not random. They were reminders to pause, to breathe, and to pay attention to the parts of himself he had long neglected. The deeper lesson is this: growing older doesn't mean growing weaker. It means growing wiser. It means tuning into the rhythm of your body and giving yourself grace. The path to better sleep, to peace, to joy, it's not paved in perfection. It's found in awareness, in intention, and in the quiet courage to change. True healing often begins in the dark, in the quietest hours. Not when the world is awake, but when you finally are. Start tonight. Just one change. Turn off your screens 60 minutes before bed. Lower the lights. Brew a cup of calming herbal tea. Take 5 deep, slow breaths. Keep a notebook beside your bed, not for tasks but for reflection. In the morning, get outside. Let the sun touch your skin. Move your body even just a little. Drink water. Eat lighter in the evening. Be kind to yourself when the clock strikes 3 a.m. These aren't complicated fixes. They're gentle shifts, small acts of self-respect. And if tonight you wake up in the dark, remember, it's okay. You're not broken. You're becoming. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share with your friends. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And if today's story touched your heart, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, stay well, and see you in the next story.